Tonight, the president will address the nation from the Oval Office on our withdrawal from Iraq. He will likely give a milquetoast speech about how we're leaving Iraq and staying in Afghanistan and how important both of those things are. Blah, blah, blah. So I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you what the president should say instead tonight, if he was the man we voted for. My fellow Americans, tonight marks the beginning of the end of the Iraq War. I cannot get our troops out of there quickly enough, because this war has been a complete and utter disaster. What have we gained? Not a damn thing. I know what we lost. Over 4,400 men and women in our armed forces, over 30,000 injured, at least 100,000 Iraqi civilians killed. Not just billions, but $1 trillion of our treasure. And unfortunately, we lost one other thing: our reputation for strength, wisdom, and decency. That dark period in our history is about to come to an end. The objective of this war was sold as finding weapons of mass destruction. Here's how many of those we found. 0. Nada. Zilch. We have gained so little from this war and lost so much. I originally called this war dumb, and how right I was. The 50,000 non-combat troops we have in there will now be withdrawn at an expedited pace, because I'm afraid they will naturally be drawn into combat, and I don't want to lose another precious American life for this godforsaken war. Speaking of which, we're leaving Afghanistan. I was originally in favor of the war in Afghanistan 9 long years ago, when Osama bin Laden was actually still there. That is not the case anymore. If we had devoted the resources we sent to Iraq to Afghanistan when al-Qaeda was still in that country, we might have gotten their top leaders. But we didn't, and they're no longer there. What's our current mission in Afghanistan? To stabilize that country? Yeah, good luck to us. That country has literally never been stable in all of human history. My ego is not that big. We're leaving. One of the reasons I'm leaving these two countries is that I don't want to lose another soldier on my watch for senseless wars built on politicians' egos. The second reason is because you elected me to bring you change, not to follow George Bush's strategy of escalations and surges. For God's sakes, we're still leaving Iraq on Bush's schedule. Could we put a little pep in our step? Well, that's what I've directed our generals to do right now. But perhaps the most important reason is that we have spent our money here. We have to spend our money here at home on behalf of the American people instead of funneling it to billionaire defense contractors. We have 9.5% unemployment, and we just spent over $1 trillion on these two asinine wars. Imagine how much we could have helped our economy if we had spent that money here. If we had poured $1 trillion into alternative energy sources, by this time, we might not need their damn oil. The spending priorities in this country are upside down. And there's a reason for that. It's because people who give us politicians money get rich off of those spending priorities. But you elected me for change. And change is what you're about to get. Starting this very minute, we're going to stop shoveling your money over to defense contractors, banks on Wall Street, and every other special interest that buys your politicians. And we're going to spend it on you. We will protect your Social Security. We will provide you with new jobs. We will get the money to small businesses that built this country, and we will rebuild this economy and restore our hope. That was my promise to you in my campaign, and that's what you're going to get starting right now. That's change you can believe in. All right, that's my speech. Any applause? Nobody? Nobody? All right, okay. I don't think you get applause in the Oval Office. But here to tell me how I did and why the president couldn't say what I just said, Jeff Shesol, former speechwriter for President Clinton and founding partner at West Wing Writers. Also with us, NBC News chief, foreign correspondent Richard Engel, who has covered the war in Iraq since it began. All right, let me start with you, Jeff. Tell me, other than the words asinine and godforsaken, why couldn't the president just say what I said?
That's what you call a blaze of glory speech. I thought you were going to announce his resignation at the end of that speech.
But why? Tell me that. I mean, what am I missing here? What's wrong with that speech? Isn't that what the American people want and voted for?
Well, I think it's what some of the American people want. I'm not sure it's what all the American people want. I think that, look, you know, it's a great exercise to write the speeches that we want presidents to give. And when I was writing for President Clinton, I would sometimes write those drafts, and we would enjoy them, and then we put them aside, because the demands on a president's got to reach a lot of different audiences at once, and that's an important audience. But I'm trying to imagine how that speech might be heard by, say, veterans of the Iraq War or actual combat troops over in Afghanistan right now, and I think that that's a critical constituency that the president's got to take care of. I think it's very difficult, whatever he may have said during the campaign or whatever he may believe today, to essentially tell 4,400 men and women that they died for a total mistake. I think he's got to look at the totality of what we're left with at the end of this experience and see where we stand going forward.
Yeah, Jeff, here's how he could help those people in Iraq and Afghanistan by making sure they don't get killed. And here's the constituency he could appeal to with that speech, the people who elected him. I know, but I'm crazy. So let me ask Richard a question here. I'm going to come back to you in a second, Jeff. Richard, I'm going to play you a clip of you from the Today Show, so you should enjoy that. And then we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's watch.
And had the United States not invaded Iraq, would we be done in Afghanistan?
Probably. That was a giant distraction of resources, of intelligence assets. That war would probably be over.
I like that. That's bold. So you really believe that? You think that if we just gone to Afghanistan, would we have gotten bin Laden by now?
That I don't exactly know if he would have been swept up in a particular raid or not, but many people I've spoken to who serve both in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and these are senior commanders, people who have also served in Washington in advisory capacity, believe that had the money, the intelligence assets, and really the focus not shifted to Iraq, then that war probably would have been over.
You know, I think that's nearly inarguable, except conventional wisdom, I'm not sure, has gotten to that point here in this country. But I want to follow up with you real quick on Iraq. Now, isn't this basically the same schedule that President Bush had, that he had signed with Prime Minister Maliki? So I mean, on the one hand, you want to give credit to Obama for following through on his campaign promise to leave Iraq. On the other hand, isn't he just doing what Bush said he'd do?
He's keeping a time schedule. There's nothing revolutionary in what he's doing. He's not expediting it. He's not bringing troops out earlier. He's just announcing tonight the end of combat operations, which actually ended about 12 days ago when the last combat troops left. But this is a moment that he's trying to mark, and he's trying to, as your earlier guest said, to acknowledge the sacrifices of the soldiers. In President Obama's last speech, when he said he was going to do this, there wasn't a lot of credit given to the soldiers. He made a national address, and he was speaking to veterans groups, and he said, "Don't worry, you troops aren't going to be hated when you come home and mistreated like what happened in Vietnam." And I was with soldiers at the time, and a lot of soldiers stood back on their back heels and said, "Well, what are you talking about? Why should we be hated?
Exactly.
We want a ticker tape parade." So I think we're going to see from the president tonight a different kind of message, going out of his way to thank for the soldiers and the Marines and all the different services.
Richard, that's a great point. So, Jeff, look, how does Obama not fall into this trap? Because the Republicans say, well, if you say the war was a disaster, which it was, because it was their war, then you are saying that the troops wasted their lives. I mean, you alluded to that earlier, right? But, I mean, what am I going to do? I thought it was a dumb war. It was a dumb war. I was right. Now, that doesn't mean the troops are at fault. Of course not. That's absurd. But how do you get it out of that political trap?
Well, I think you try not to spend too much time talking about the past. You try to talk about the moment, and you try to talk about the path forward, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't think the president has any interest in walking everybody through the history of this war, where the previous administration made huge mistakes, where he differed with the previous administration. This is not going to be a history lesson he's going to deliver tonight. He's going to speak, I think, frankly about the state of affairs as they exist right now in Iraq, and obviously he'll do so with reference, probably explicit reference to what's going on in Afghanistan.
I enjoy this conversation, but I couldn't disagree with you more. That's what the Democrats always do. Oh, let's not ever blame the Republicans for their disastrous mistakes. Let's just look forward. And oh, look at that. We lost an election. How did that happen? Because you didn't tell the American people what you were for and what you were against. But that's my opinion. Jeff and Richard, thank you both so much.